Hello?
Hi.
Hi.
Yep.
There's all this noise coming through. Uh,
Say again.
oh yeah, there's all this noise was coming through.
What kind of noise? Like static?
Yeah, but much of static noise is coming through for a second. Okay, yeah, that's better. Alrighty. Yeah. So, did you read that article?
I did.
You did? Okay. Yeah, I read most of it. And everything. How about you, Dwayne?
How you doing? Yeah, I read a little bit of the article. It was about Sarbanes-Oxley and the corrupt system. I guess.
Nice. All right. Cool. I guess I'm trying to figure out exactly what we're supposed to do this week. I guess we're supposed to write an article or something, or a paragraph.
Yeah, paragraph on bias, right? Is that what I interpreted?
Okay. Alrighty. So we just have to go through each one of these bullet points and discuss it, and then write a paragraph. Take 5 to 10 minutes to write a paragraph. So, does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Alrighty. Well, it says on there the title of the unit is ethics. But according to the article you just read, at least in the case of auditors, teaching auditors about ethics will not have an impact on bias. So the author suggests education that helps auditors understand the errors and the reasons they make them. For business students and others who will not be auditors, what kind of education, if any, would help future business professionals avoid bias? And is it pointless? So, so basically, what kind of I don't know, what kind of education would stop that kind of bias? You, any kind of ideas at all, or?
I think it's just basically ethics, right?
Yeah.
What your personal ethics is, I guess. Your personal beliefs.
Personal beliefs. I believe in that, like, you're going to be honest, no matter what, right?
Right. No matter if it's going to be better for the business or not.
Yeah.
The dishonesty, it'll come and bite you somehow, in some way.
And some way it'll always come back and get you, that sort of thing. And I know one of the videos I watched from one of the lawyers talked about doing in-house legal work and that sort of thing, and that way they were able to take care of issues before they need to go outside and get other kind of legal advice, and that way they can avoid lawsuits and other types of litigation and so forth. But my guess is they would have to have that kind of honesty and that sort of ethical behavior in order to stop those types of errors from happening.
Right.
But you know what? I put down for my example, the bias is so easy to have because, my example was kind of growing up here in Mesa, Arizona, and everything. We're really good people. One thing that I've noticed is that I automatically assume that everybody is a member of the church. And every activity I go to, without even asking them, and at times that's kind of I've stuck my foot in my mouth sometimes, and because I automatically assume things, and at times I automatically assume that a certain doctor or somebody in any profession will be good if they happen to also be LDS as well, and that's not always the case. And so it's so easy how that can kind of go through, the kind of bias. I think if they live our religion right, then yeah, I think that'll definitely help. But just because somebody's not isn't going to mean that they're going to somehow be bad at their job. So it kind of surprised me how natural this kind of bias can happen if you're not careful. So that was my idea. What do you think, Kyle?
So I'm gonna start a disclaimer for today. Yesterday I got 1 hour of sleep, and I've been running on that 1 hour sleep now for like 22 hours or something like that. So if I say anything stupid, just discredit that.
Okay. No problem.
When I read this question, for students and others who will not be auditors, what kind of education, if any, would help future business professionals avoid bias? And you think about what bias is. You know, it's like a preconceived notion that one thing is right or one thing is wrong.
Yeah.
And it's tricky. It's like the example that I found was it's from the Wall Street Journal, and it's CVC Capital sells gender bias claims.
Uh-huh.
And so you guys have all heard the stories of gender equality a billion times. And to some degree, we even make fun of it. Those feminazis, right?
Yeah.
But in this instance, for example, there was a lady who got fired. She went out, she took maternity leave and got skipped over for the promotions and whatnot that she had been working for. And then she filed a complaint about gender discrimination to her superiors and then was fired for it.
Really?
Yeah. And so in this particular incident, the company itself or its executives or whoever's in charge have a bias that male employees are better employees.
Really? That's
Yeah.
weird.
So how do you take something that's naturally been ingrained into their system and overcome that? Because everyone to some degree or another, you gain bias. And this, like, I have a kind of a personal example. This is going to sound racist. I'm not racist.
Yeah.
But so sitting on an airplane, right? I'm assuming you've both flown before, right?
Yeah.
And so you when you want to sit next to, if you're flying by yourself, you want to sit next to somebody. You want that person to be quiet. You want them to smell good. You don't want them to, make your flight uncomfortable.
Correct.
And so when you're picking people to sit next to on that airplane, what are you doing the entire time you're looking for a seat?
Great
Just
person.
looking around and trying to figure things out.
You're, to some degree, you're profiling.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
looking at somebody like you see the big round guy who's got a hot dog stain on his shirt, and you're thinking, I probably don't want to sit next to that guy. You got a mom with her screaming little 2-year-old kid. I probably don't want to sit next to that.
Yeah.
I mean, and then that's not as big of an example of like bias, but to some degree, like people have experiences through their entire lifetime that develop their bias or their preference towards a given situation.
Correct.
Which
Yeah.
that's what makes it. So looking back at the question, so for business students and others that that are not going to be auditors, what kind of education would help prevent bias, and is it pointless? I feel like the only way you can really circumvent bias is you have to teach that all people are actually people, not just tools for making money or tools to manipulate, but that everyone's life is valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only way you're going to get that bias out of the way. So to some degree, it is pointless, because I could go take an ethics class about how to be a better person, but depending on how certain groups or whatnot treat me, I may or may not still have those biases.
Correct. Absolutely.
That is true. I mean, it's your own situation. Yeah.
And it never comes down to one event. That's the thing. I mean, there are some very extreme circumstances where someone might hate so-and-so or hate a group of people or an idea because they had one really, really bad experience. But aside from that, it usually is the culmination of multiple outside influences, whether it was parents that taught their kids, oh yeah, you never want to believe in this. Whatever you do, don't do this. In combination with, oh yeah, my parents told me, for example, that Mexicans will always steal your stuff, and then a Mexican stole my car like 10 years later.
Yeah.
As an example.
Correct. Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel like it's hard to root it out all the way. Um, I guess the one thing I can think of is just to do what we can to try to avoid it by teaching good ethical principles. Um, but yeah, but bias will always be there to some certain extent. I think as well. And so to fully get rid of it, I think is pointless. Anyway, should we go on to the next bullet point?
Yeah.
All right. Does the author suggest that the status quo, the universally accepted practice in the United States of how audit firms are hired, paid, and work with the companies they audit results in bad audits? Do you agree? Why do you think when Congress passed the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, there weren't more radical reforms like the ones suggested by the authors?
Bias.
Bias.
One word answer. Final answer.
Yes. Let's see here. Yeah, because in other words, you're basically saying that even though that act came out, it still didn't take away some of the things that it talked about and everything. And so why weren't there more radical reforms taking place? And is it just because of bias, or did they kind of feel it was pointless, maybe?
I think it's probably bias, right?
Just 100% bias?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that bias that's created, this one. So hang on, give me 1 second. I'm looking here on the actual Doom. So psychological research shows that our desires powerfully influence the way we interpret information, even when we're trying to be objective and impartial. So you think about those desires, and especially when it comes to politics. I mean, oh my gosh, politics, you cannot find a better place to look at bias.
Yeah.
But looking at this question, it says, okay, so the way that audit firms are hired and paid, and they result in bad audits, I definitely agree to some point. I think a lot of the time when it comes to finances and companies and politics especially, there's always a hidden agenda that people are trying to pursue. And as a result, when they try to pursue these hidden agendas or they're trying to get what they want, they don't make decisions based on a rational perspective. Their view of reality becomes distorted.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at, even just current politics right now, Hillary or Trump, it's amusing because they're making these decisions and everyone's going, oh yeah, vote for Hillary, or yeah, vote for Trump. But at the end of the day, both candidates, I feel like if you really look at them, they don't give a crap hardly about what's going to happen to us. They're just trying to throw the other candidate under the bus, and they're trying to further themselves in their political careers.
Yeah. Also, one thing I think that is crazy about politics is that it doesn't matter what comes out that is negative on one party or the other. Those who are originally against that politician will use that as a tool to try to prove the faultiness of that candidate, while the other person will find a way to defend it. It happens every time, and we don't get any further. So I think that's a great example of bias on when it comes to politics. Anyway,
I mean, we could sit here for hours and discuss how politics are biased, but
Oh, yeah.
yes, absolutely.
I mean, at the end of the day, you even look at just politics as a whole. You think back to the original, fathers of our country.
Uh-huh.
Everything they did for our country, and I love history, but you look at everything they did, it was completely selfless, more or less. It was about the future of the company or country. It was about how it was going to help the people and how it was going to benefit the people. They don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Not even close.
Yeah. I mean, I know that there were definitely some differences of opinion back then, but I don't think it's like it is now.
Yeah,
Well,
we've hit an all-time low, guys.
We have, yes, absolutely.
well, I think also today's media is what's causing
Yeah.
a lot of these problems. The bias. I mean, you don't know what's true or not any day.
True. Yeah, it's very hard in that respect. Alrighty, the next bullet point says that the article is specifically about auditors, but most of the studies are about human nature in general, and a few are specifically about lawsuits. Do you think that the bias that was discovered for plaintiffs and defendants leads to a flawed legal system? Why or why not? Since lawyers are advocates for their clients, how much do you think lawyers are affected by bias? Completely by bias, yeah. Does this create a flawed system? What are the advantages or disadvantages of a system where a lawyer is hired to advocate on behalf of her client? Well, I can think about a couple of things. In Arizona, a few years ago, we had that highly televised murder case, the Jodi Arias case. I'm sure you know about that, right, Kyle?
Yeah.
I vaguely remember. It's been a while.
Yeah. Oddly enough, I actually knew the killer, not really personally, but she was in my ward, which was very creepy. Yeah. I also knew this person I knew and talked to just briefly was all of a sudden in jail for murder. But I remember watching the videos and everything, and just watching the prosecution fight so hard on their side, and then the defendants doing all they could to fight on their behalf and everything. And the questions that they were answering at times were so stupid, but it was everything that they could legally do to win, or anything they could do to win on their side, even though it just seemed completely lacking of ethical content and everything. And it was just unbelievable to watch, and they did everything they could to use discrediting, defamation, taking people's names and just dragging them through the mud, anything they could do to be able to make that happen, and that was a real eye-opener. So it was just crazy to look at that. On the other hand, I know that that's what they're paid to do. Their job is to defend their client no matter what. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, the no matter what part, especially.
Yeah. I mean, they did everything they could. Like some of the evidence was so blatantly obvious that it was guilty, at least to me. But the things that the other side would do to try to make it seem false, I mean, it was kind of crazy to me on that. But at the same time, he was kind of doing his job, and then at the end, he's like, you know what, I want to be off this case. So, Judge, can you please release me so I don't have to defend her? That's what he said at the end. So that kind of proves it right there, I think. But
I feel like if you look at the legal system itself, and tying it kind of into the gospel's perspective a little bit, so compassion and or justice and mercy. Some people are in a position where they need mercy.
Yeah.
Where they made a mistake, but it's not like they went out and murdered somebody or did something, incredibly atrocious.
Yeah.
That's when you need an advocate to say, hey, look, this guy made a mistake, but this isn't what he deserves, kind of thing.
Correct.
Whereas someone who, is a rapist or does something that's completely out of line, that's where justice needs to come down and just smite them with a hammer.
Yeah.
But you think about how a case system like that works, you have a jury that comes in and they're the ones that determine how these events go down.
Yeah.
So you'll have a judge that is got their own personal opinions, that they're the ones mediating the whole thing.
Correct.
So depending on how they ask the questions, that can skew it one way or another. But then you also have the jury that when they come in, they have their own set of beliefs as well. And that's why in some cases, did you guys ever take B448? Or no, not 48, sorry, B275.
B275, isn't that what we're taking now?
Oh, sorry. No, sorry. Okay. So there's
Yes, I have taken that. Taking
Sorry.
it right.
You know,
Shut up,
fine.
Garrett. No one cares.
He's only had 1 hour of sleep. It's all good.
The thing is, okay, so I'm taking marketing law in addition to business law, and they both interchange back and forth.
Yeah,
I think it was this class we talked about. You know how there's the appellate courts?
correct.
That's
Yeah.
why those are even a thing to begin with, because the fact that bias in the way things can play out, someone may not get what's necessarily a fair and just verdict. So that gives people the opportunity to go back and say, look, this is how this was perceived, and you missed this entire piece of information.
Uh-huh.
Dude, I want you to try this again. So I feel like one of the biggest disadvantage is a lot of the times people can get away with murder, essentially. O.J. Simpson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And based on how the perception is displayed, they can avoid the justice that would normally hit them, as well as at the same time, there are some people who deserve that mercy and either don't get it or they do get it just because of the person they've hired as their lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing. I mean, I have I guess kind of a friend of mine who's a lawyer, and he made the point that even if somebody's completely guilty, he said that they deserve a right to be defended and that sort of thing, and that's just kind of the way our system works.
Even though that person that's defending that guy, who, like, for example, if a guy kills a kid in front of everybody,
Yeah,
everyone's going to convict, like, you killed the guy,
yeah.
but to be heard out, but that lawyer doesn't want to defend that guy.
Yeah, I know for that Jody Arias case, like I said, he wanted off the case. He wanted to be released. He asked the judge time and time again, and the judge kept denying him. So he just went and kept defending her until he was able to get released. And so that was very interesting. Let's see here. Next question. Can you think of situations outside of auditing where there are lots of opportunities for bias? What could you do to change that situation? Well, we kind of talked a lot about that already, but any other ideas of what you could do to change that sort of thing? I don't know, Garrett?
Any way to change bias?
Yeah.
Well, when I was reading the article, I thought that the best way to deal with bias was to educate people about it, but then specifically in the case it said that that doesn't work at all.
Yeah.
I forgot what they said actually works. I think it's like, if you can somehow take away the incentive for people, like in the case of the auditors, like it said, not have them be hired by the company they're auditing, you know, not let the other party have a strong hold over them.
Yeah.
Or give them lots of incentives. It makes it a lot easier to not be biased.
Well, yeah, that is true. If there's an incentive, you're going to be more biased, I think, in that auditing purposes.
I feel like bias is just something that's really hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you try to do it completely, yeah, absolutely.
I'll be right back, guys. Give me one moment.
All right, cool. Let's see here. Next one says, if you are an accounting major, what will you do about what you learned from reading this article? Are any of you guys going to be a major in accounting?
Nope.
No.
No, I've taken 2 classes of that and wanted to do shoot myself. So
Me too.
Yeah, no, the financial accounting I had to take twice. Still just got a seed, and then the managerial accounting, I was doing like 4-hour conference calls trying to do just one assignment. It was horrible. But what will you do about what you learned? Well, kind of just what we talked about already, you know. And why do you think it's so difficult to overcome bias, even when you know about it? Well, it's because what we talked about already. It's very natural and and
It's
kind
ingrained.
it's ingrained. Yeah.
I mean, I
Anyway.
think you have
Okay.
to try hard to not be it. I mean, you have to know. I mean, I don't want to say it's human nature, but it's what it is, I guess.
Dwayne, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I almost feel like you have to know yourself.
Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
to understand what your bias is before going into making a decision. And you need to be able to look and go, you know what? Even though I don't like this, or I don't believe in this, or this is something I just absolutely disgust, or, oh yeah, I totally love this, I really want this. Being able to step back and pull yourself out of the equation and then look at something objectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if you don't know what your own biases are, then
There's no way.
there's no way, because then you're going to go into a decision case, and it's kind of like what they were talking about at the beginning of the article. You know, these subconscious decisions or errors that are being made. They're not subconscious because they wanted them to be there. It's just something that's been developed.
Yeah.
Very true. Well, should we write a paragraph and call it a night?
I agree.
Sounds good.
Especially the calling it a night part. I definitely want that.
Yeah. Now, after this is done, are you going to just go to bed? Or
I'm probably going to face plant into my pillow, so we'll see.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, let's write a paragraph real quick.
He already is asleep. He's just like in zombie mode.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet. Yeah, when you're only had like an hour of sleep, it really sucks.
You know, the funny thing is, I've kind of bypassed that, and I'm at the entire day. Like, I did a presentation for one of my professors today for a midterm, and I still got a 45 out of 50.
There you
wow.
go.
I feel like when I'm tired, the only thing that just wears me out, but I can still function or fire on all cylinders, I guess.
Uh-huh.
But it's exhausting, dude. I need some serious R&R.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm kind of starting one right now. I guess if you guys just want to add a sentence, basically, or the main point of the paragraph, do we want to just basically say that bias is kind of inherent and ingrained into our systems? We just have to look at ourselves. Do you want this to kind of be a general description about bias, or do you want to get kind of specific in certain situations?
I'm sorry, where are you looking again?
Oh, I'm talking basically when it comes to writing this paragraph. Like when we write this paragraph, do you want to get specific about something, or do you want to just kind of generally describe what we just talked about?
Well, if you look at the assignment, it just says, you know, you can. So we just talked about a bunch of different bullet points.
Yeah.
And I don't think it matters, really, 4